as poetry. They mark them off as poetic, which they are. Okay, they're Hebrew poetry. At the poetic scenes of the Torah, we have messianic prophecy telling us that things we need to know about the Messiah. So, what sets it off as messianic? It will be poetic, and it will speak of a coming one, and it will most often mention eschatology. It will mention the last days. Okay? Watch what happens here. Numbers 24, verse 11. He says this, and now, verse 14, excuse me, 24:14. And now indeed I'm going to my people. Come, I will advise you what this people will do to your people in the latter days. Acharit Yamim. That's clue. That's eschatology. That's future. Okay? Now look what he says. Verse 17. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob, a scepter shall rise out of Israel, and batter the brow of Moab and destroy all the sons of tumult. And he goes on here. So there's a star coming and a scepter coming. And this star and scepter are messianic language. Okay? A king. He's got a scepter. He's a king. And he's coming from the heavenly realm. That's why he's a star. He's going to come from the heavenly realm like stars do. They're bright. They move. They're in the heavenlies. Okay? So, by the way, I mentioned for you here that if you go to history, I mentioned for you here 132 AD, Bar Kokhba, son of the star, has a revolt from 132 to 135. They call it the Bar Kokhba revolt. Rabbi Akiva thought he was the Mashiach and labeled him as such. His name was Bar Kokhba. He gets called Bar Kokhba. They renamed him, meaning it's a messianic title. And all the way through rabbinic material, they realize that 24:17 is a messianic text, telling us the Messiah is coming, a scepter is coming, the star is coming. That's the hymn that will come out of them. And this all has reference to Acharit Yamim, the end of days. This is eschatological, yes.
When he comes, Revelation 19, he comes with a sword.
Yes.
Also, the sword is the word in his mouth. Yeah,
I was going to tie that. I think I might have mentioned that in. I want to mention Revelation 2:14 with that one. Let's see. There was some other mention. Yes, he's got the sword on his thigh. Yeah, very interesting how we have a very similar parallels. So here's what's interesting. When we get to the poetry, what's the poetry? Genesis 49, poetry, prophecy about the Messiah. Exodus 15, Song of the Sea, poetry. Adonai Yimlok Le'olam Va'ed. There's poetry. The Lord your God will reign forever and ever. We're going to talk about a king. We're going to talk about his rule and his reign. Leviticus, there's no poetry, so there's no messianic text. Numbers 22 to 24. All of a sudden we get to poetry again, and they start talking about the Messiah. That's the tip-off. We start hearing Acharit Yamim. We hear about a star and a scepter. We hear about him coming out of them. Okay? There's a greater one. This is why Hosea 11:1 says, out of Egypt I have called my son. Hosea 11:1. Hosea is looking at the trajectory of Numbers. So this is why I'm talking about the scriptures. Now watch what happens. So Numbers 22 and 24 say, out of them will come a him, who will be a star, he'll be in the heavenlies, and a scepter, he'll be a king. But he's going to come down. And this is eschatological. It's moving us toward the trajectory of the end times. Hosea, further down the line, says, out of Egypt I've called my son. We get to Matthew, and we have the birth of Yeshua, and he says, out of Egypt I've called my son, Matthew 2:15. Matthew's looking back at Hosea. Hosea is looking back at Numbers. All of this is building because Matthew says he's arrived.
Yes.
He's arrived. Okay? So it's all connected, and we have to connect up the dots. but it's a messianic prophecy about this coming one and what he's going to do. And it's put here in these Balaam oracles as Balaam gives these prophecies related to Israel and the people of Moab. So it's all connected. We know from Genesis 49, it's going to be Judah, tribe of Judah, where this king is going to come from. Okay, but he's going to also be heavenly. He's a star. He's going to come down from heaven. No, Bar Kokhba didn't come out of Judah. But Rabbi Akiva, by the way, almost every generation of Israel's history had an individual that they claimed was the Messiah. Almost every generation had somebody that they were claiming was the Messiah. Like I said, you got Rabbi Akiva who claimed that Bar Kokhba was. One problem with Bar Kokhba, he died and never came back. Nobody ever saw him after he died. He never did. By the way, all the expectations, there's no one that lived up to all the expectations of the Messiah, ever. Here's what's interesting. I saw it again this time when I was in Israel. I saw it when we were there last time. There's a book out now called The Rebbe. The Rebbe. Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. They have signs all over Israel that claim that Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson will resurrect, that he is the Messiah, and that he will come back. And so this is the Chabad. They're claiming that he's going to come back as the Messiah. One day. Right? It's interesting. So you see signs around Israel with his picture on it, and underneath it, I got a picture of it. Underneath it, it says, our beloved Rabbi, who is Messiah, and he's coming back. And you're like, wow. Sounds interesting.
Who is the guy? Who was the guy?
He was the last Lubavitch rabbi that was the head of the Chabad, the Orthodox group of Chabad.
Kabbalah? Kabbalah?
No, Chabad. Chabad is an acronym.
When?
He died in 2000. No, excuse me.
Was it 2003?
He died in 2004. I want to say.
This
something
was
like
pretty
that.
recent.
So he's been dead for quite a while. I mean, but there's this irony that he's coming back.
It's been longer than 3 days.
Yeah.
In trouble.
You know what's interesting is the Chabad have taken a lot of criticism within Orthodox Judaism, because Orthodox Judaism realizes, in its bigger picture, realizes, you know what, you guys are saying the same things that Messianic Judaism is saying. That there's one who can come and who can rise from the dead and who will be the Mashiach. But here's what's fascinating. As I look at this text, God does not allow Balaam for any amount of money to have the ability to curse Israel. He doesn't give him the ability to do so. He protects his people. All the way through this, as much as Balaam wants to sell out and to get as much money as he can, he doesn't allow him to curse Israel. Go with me to Jude. Go with me to Jude. Book of Jude. We don't read this one often either. But look at this. It says this. Verse 8, we can read down. Likewise, also the dreamers defile the flesh, reject authority, and speak evil of dignitaries. Yet Michael the archangel, in contending with the devil, when he disputed about the body of Moses, dared not bring against him a reviling accusation, but said, "The Lord rebuke you." But these speak evil of whatever they do not know, and whatever they know naturally, like brute beasts. In these things they corrupt themselves. Woe to them, for they have gone in the way of Cain, have run greedily in the error of Balaam for profit, and perished in the rebellion of Korah.
Ouch.
And my point is this. as we think, again, eschatologically, we should be careful of those, and I'm just going to speak very broad terms here, we should be careful of those who speak the scriptures or are ministers or whatever, and we should look behind the scenes to see if what they do is for profit. If it's for mass profit. Nothing wrong with making a living. I'm not talking about that. Reasonable to make a living. But I'm talking where people are being incredibly fleeced and where millions are being made on the backs of people under the guise of ministry. I think one has to at least look at these things and go, okay. And I suspect that these three will continue in the future. The rebellion of Cain, the greed of Korah, the greed of Balaam, and the rebellion of Korah. That all that will escalate as we move toward end times. And we'll see more of these individuals who just want to speak whatever. They don't want to say anything to anybody for any amount of money. Doesn't matter. They're for hire. They will prostitute themselves and say whatever you want to hear in order to gain any amount of money. And again, if a pastor or a minister makes the median average, that's legit. If they're making it, what everybody around them is making, that's legit. But when they're making 3, 4, 5, 6 times what everybody around them, what they're ministering to makes, seems to be that we've gone past the place where it should be.
That's where the love of money became evil.
Yeah, the love of money. So nothing wrong with having money. I'm not saying that. That's not my point. I'm saying, look, we should look at these ministries. Before we support ministries, we should look at them and say, what are they doing? What are they doing with the money? When I talk to ministries all the time, I say, especially ministries that take in money, quite volume-wise, and I say, how much of every dollar actually goes to ministry? It actually gets to what you guys say you are doing. And there's some of these ministries that 20% on the dollar, 20 cents on the dollar actually gets to what they're actually ministering. 80% is taken up in administrative costs, which comes down to salaries and bonuses and all this other stuff. But it's a ministry, and you're going, how come 20 cents on the dollar actually gets to the ministry?
Should be 80%.
It should be 80-20.
And not many people know that.
And not many people know this or ask. They just assume that every dollar they're giving,
Trust it.
if I give $1, the dollar's going to ministry. And what you don't realize is oftentimes that dollar is going into somebody's pocket, into somebody's bank account. And nothing wrong with some of these ministries. I'm just saying you got to be careful that investigate and ask them how much of every dollar that I give is actually going to the cause that you guys are dealing with. That to me seems a legit question. I recently asked that of a friend of mine. He leads he's part of a national organization that leads, they raise money. So how much of every dollar actually goes to helping people and gets to the streets? Because it's a legit question. It's a very legit question. And then then the criteria would be, if you have a pastor, then look at the median around him. I mean, he shouldn't be making massively less, or should he be making massively more? It should be averaged. That's fair. But we have a lot of people in Christianity, and just again, broad picture here, that make a lot of money on the backs of people giving. That's absorbent. I mean, it goes way beyond. And this is Balaam. He's willing to say anything to anybody, at least in his head. Now, God stops him. That's the sovereignty of God. But he's willing to say anything to anybody for any amount of money. It's greed. It's like, okay, give me some more money and I'll say whatever you want me to say. I'll curse whoever you want me to curse. Yeah.
It's interesting to know, too, that every time it gets up in the ante.
Yes. Yes, he does. He keeps... In fact, Balaam thinks that he's in the negotiations. He thinks that the first refusal is just Balaam's way of saying,
Are you kidding me?
I want more.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's not enough. That's, negotiating. This is why Balak keeps sending people to him. He doesn't think that his original no is a real no. He thinks it's a no, but I could be negotiated with. Can't sell out. You got to say, okay, we've had too many ministers, too many people that teach the word that have sold out to a lot of things along the way. And it's something we have to think about. So whenever I'm challenging on this, if you give to organizations, ask them, where does this go? Is there an accounting? And how much of this gets to the actual thing that they say it goes to? I think it's a fair question to them. And it should be at least 80-20. Any comments or questions? Anybody? All at once? All right. Please take your siddur. Do the tradition.